Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am a proud co-sponsor of the MORE Act because the federal government has screwed up marijuana policy in this country for a generation. We lied to people about the effects of marijuana, and then we used marijuana as a cudgel to incarcerate just wide swaths of communities, and particularly in African-American communities. And so I am not offended by the concept of restorative justice in marijuana policy, because we cannot honestly say that the war on drugs impacted suburban white communities the same way it affected urban black communities. We can't say that marijuana enforcement was happening the same way on the corner than it was happening in the fraternity house. And we have an opportunity to fix that problem. You know, the war on drugs, much like many of our forever wars, has been a failure. If there's been a war on drugs, drugs have won that war. And so rather than continuing to make a small group of people continue to pay the price for those bad decisions, we ought to democratize access to a federalist system that allows states to make these decisions. And I respect the concerns of my Republican colleagues, but it seems to be a little inconsistent with our perspective on federalism to say that we don't want states to innovate and develop their own programs and to test and to fail and to succeed and then to copy each other's best practices in a way that improves quality of life for people. I heard the ranking member make comments on the developing brain, and I pay close attention to that because I do believe the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee likely has the best developed brain in my conference. But there is specific science that we've had access to that informs on brain development. And it all has to do with when brain cells stop dividing. So up until the age of 24, for most people, your brain cells are still dividing. And so things like football or wrestling or soccer or a number of things can be harmful during that process. And that's why we take such care for the brain. That's why we encourage the innovation around protective equipment. After 24, those cells stop dividing. And there is very compelling research that suggests that the utilization of cannabis can actually protect the brain after that division from some degenerative brain diseases. I mean, I think in the country right now, we are all seeing the impact at a very high level of when someone starts to have mental acuity that declines. And if we are able to have access for people to a medicine that would help, I would think we would want that for everyone, from the least powerful to the most powerful. Taxes are an issue raised in the bill, and I want to thank Chairman Nadler and Congresswoman Jackson Lee for hearing me out on this point. In my state, in Florida, there's not permissive adult use. It is a medical program. So the people who use marijuana in my state use it for medicine. Nowhere in America today do we tax medicine. And I do have some concerns about the provisions of the bill that, for the first time, would impose a tax on people who are trying to get well or get better. And so I hope as we work on the legislation going forward that we think about people exercising adult use rights versus people participating in a medical program, both from the consumer and from the grower standpoint. I really like giving this speech every year, but it does sort of feel like deja vu, Mr. Chairman. And I regret that deeply because we ought to pass bills into law. This bill is not going to become law. The Senate won't take it up and pass it. I wish they would, but they won't. There is legislation they would take up and pass, the States Act, which I think might underdo it a little on some of the needed restorative justice, but that would at least build some momentum. I think about the years Mr. Blumenauer's been working on this, and frankly, how little progress we've made on something that is so overwhelmingly popular in the country, and we are paralyzed. And the result of that paralysis is that patients have higher costs, that businesses have a problem meeting the needs of their patients, and we have a very disjointed system. So when I asked the chairman in the last Congress whether following the passage of the MORE Act, we might consider taking up the States Act, the chairman's response to me was, no, we want to negotiate off the MORE Act with the Senate, which as a legislative strategy made some sense to me at the time, but it didn't work. And here we are, and we don't have a bill. So it's just my sincere hope that we take a strong stand, pass the MORE Act, make the right, just, proper arguments regarding federalism and restorative justice, but then we not merely surrender the debate, to those who want to see us divided and paralyzed, but we advance that debate with legislation that could actually pass the Senate. I thank the committee's indulgence, and I yield back.